happy that Bill is here, plus all the other musicians. This is kind of a renaissance of the old library chamber concerts that happened sometime in the past. But more to the point, this particular one is paired with the exhibit next door about Fritz Fuglister. This is the third event of 3 touching the art, music, and oceanography of Fritz Fuglister. And we want to recognize Kurt Fuglister in the back, who sine qua non of the exhibit. Yeah. Likewise. And likewise Ann Halpin, whose brainchild the whole field was. We're very, very happy to have this because Bill Simmons is not only a cellist and was also an oceanographer with Fritz Fuglister. He also played in the concerts at their home. So this is particularly wonderful. So.
Before we play, I want to try to say a few explanatory notes about what happened at Fuglister House and how it happened. The thing that we engaged in was called house music, and it's a term that not everyone is familiar with. It's a centuries old and venerable pastime. I'm going to have to read my notes or I'll just leave things out. It's an avocation, really, and it's when you do house music, it's essential to have a day job. Basically, players get together at one another's house and they play for fun. It's like golf or bridge or tennis or any other of those avocations in that devotees can be close to fanatical in their pursuit of it, and Fritz and Celia certainly fell into that category. Unlike those categories, house music is never competitive. No winners, no losers. Each player is allocated some notes to play, and you're responsible to play them. If you miss them, no one else will play them. And the objective isn't anyone's allotment of notes or how the player plays them. House music is about how the 4 players fit their notes together. And there's an endless variety of ways to do that. So you never run out of fun. House musicians rarely practice ahead of time. They usually just go sit down, they play unrehearsed. And you'll be relieved to know that we're going to break that rule tonight. Because they're reading, they don't always play all the notes. Or they don't always play them all correctly. Or if they play them correctly, they may not play them at exactly the right time. So things don't always sound exactly the way they were intended. They are all real aspects of house music, and they don't much matter. What matters is how the 4 parts are put together, rendered approximately, and how the 4 players respond to one another in the moment. It's almost like actors engaged in a scripted conversation, but it's a kind of a free-for-all conversation where everybody's talking at the same time. So, a little complex. Now, other vocations are largely social interactions punctuated by moments of intense concentration. House music is the other way around. It's all-consuming, non-stop mental and physical labor, and the sessions usually run for 3 grueling hours with very brief breaks to collect your breath or your wits. It's so intense that players in large numbers report that their aches and pains go away, including allergies, go away while they're playing. There's no acting in house music, no bluffing, no putting on airs, no one-upsmanship. When you play house music, you strap your heart right there on your arm, and you show yourself as though naked, warts and all. And that's why listeners are usually not invited. There's too much at stake. And if a player is uncomfortable with exposing himself to that kind of vulnerability, probably house music is not a good choice for them. But when the group is right, when it works, the payback is sublime, and the end result, that's the result that we're all searching for. The connections that form are often deep and lasting, quite like love connections. There are quartets that work so well that they have met for 40 years with the same personnel, and one of them has occurred right in this town, and it's meeting to this day, and one of its players I spot right over there. In Fritz and Celia's first date, when they first met, they of course played string quartets. And within a year, they were married. And they remained string quartet partners for 4 decades. That's an example of how close the ties are. So fond am I of the Geostrophic members of the Geostrophic String Quartet, that I married one of them. And please keep that to yourselves, because we haven't yet told David and Matthew. In '89, Celia and I co-authored a paper about house music in and around Falmouth, and it was published in the Spritzel, the '93 edition, and you can see that if you want to find out more. But what happened at Fritz's house was that in the mid-40s, they moved here to Woods Hole, Juniper Point. Fritz was still working on the mural at Brockton Public Library, the WPA-sponsored project. Eric was a newborn. Money was tight. So to help make ends meet, Fritz and Celia rented rooms to Ruth and Bill Von Arx, who just happened to play the viola and the cello. Bill had just graduated and was working down at the Oceanographic, and it was a fortuitous arrangement, because during the period where they lived together, those 4 could form a string quartet just by hollering up the steps. Very nice. When the Von Arxes moved out, I think they ended up on Bodden Street, I can't remember, but in Woods Hole. They continued to play, but Fritz and Celia wanted to widen their circle of friends. And so they opened their doors every Friday night to what eventually came to be known as the Friday Night Music House. Everyone was welcome. You didn't need an invitation. They could accommodate whoever came. On an average section, they would draw something like 6 or 10 players. And listeners were tolerated at that, but they were not encouraged. They went on for 20 years, every Friday night, opening their doors. And 3 types of players tended to show up. The majority were adult townies, like the Von Arxes, who could play. And as I think there are several of them here in the audience that I've got a spot. They're smiling at me. They also like to invite children and local kids who were rank beginners and who, for the most part, couldn't play. And that's a very interesting aspect, because the kids were eager. And eagerness was as big a calling card as was skill. They wanted to encourage the kids to play. And then, too, we had our visiting dignitaries, vacationers, scholars, researchers who came to various labs and deliver seminars and things, and who could play. And specifically, I can remember Michael Longett Higgins and Lou Howard and Michael McIntyre. The list goes on and on and on. There are just a few that happen to come to my mind. And in fact, when I designed the Geostrophic String Quartet, I tried to have a visiting dignitary, a local kid, and a wife hostess type. And that's why we got these 4 fellows who are got these from the tree. In the 60s, Fritz, they decided to stop doing musicals. It was too much work. They started to focus on smaller ensembles, mostly string quartets. Those sessions were invitational, and they convened whenever we could get the 4 people. In summer, they often occurred more than once a week. And that's at about the time when I came to Woods Hole. And Fritz and Celia seemed pleased and relieved to let me take over the scheduling and the inviting while they did the hosting. And that involved a lot of sturdy chairs, strong lights, music stands, a great music library, and every time we played, Fritz had to rearrange the living room furniture to accommodate us, and then put it back together when we left. Celia's job was to provide goodies at the end. That's an important aspect of a chamber music band. It was hard work. She was very good at it, and I'm thrilled that the Historical Museum is following in her footsteps tonight. That's great. A typical evening at the Fuglisters, we'd start with a Haydn, we'd do a Mozart or a Mendelssohn, and then finally we'd do a Beethoven or perhaps a Brahms or a Schubert, depending on who the group was. But far and away the favorites were the Beethovens, and of those, the 18s ruled. Now, it's very interesting to note that of all the composers we played at the Fuglisters, the ones that the Fuglisters loved, every one of the composers themselves was an ardent and active house musician. And they weren't always very good players, we are told. Beethoven himself was a lousy pianist. But let's not go there. So for the first half of this evening's concert, the Geostrophic String Quartet is going to perform Beethoven's very first string quartet. It is known as Opus 18 No. 2. It's an earth-shatteringly different kind of music. compared to anything that came before it. It's in 4 movements. I've tried to list them there. You can probably hardly see them. And each of them is fairly straightforward structurally. And except for, don't be fooled by the adagio. In the adagio, he states the first movement, and he's just bringing it to an end with a little 5-note finger that goes da da dee da da. You can't miss it. It stands out all by itself. And then he thinks, oh gee, that might work fast. And so he starts right in the middle of the adagio. He starts a fast movement. Dee-da-da-dum, 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 the same little 4-note figure. And he just does that until he's done with it, and then he goes back to the adagio. First time anybody, other composers may have thought of that, but no one ever did it before. So it's the first time it occurs in chamber music. That's about it, ladies and gentlemen. The Geostrophic String Quartet.